Over the past few years, everything has changed. Where and how we work and live, the way we collaborate and measure success, and the emerging technologies we use to get it all done. Welcome to The Bridge. Join our host, Scott Kinka, in a series of discussions with top leaders in technology and learn about how they bridge their lives and their businesses into our new hybrid work and AI-driven reality. Our hope is that the insights and experiences will help you on your journey in business and in life from who we were to who we are today. And maybe it'll help you get better prepared for whatever comes next. The Bridge is a service of Bridgepointe Technologies, the nation's leading IT advisory firm. Bridgepointe helps business leaders evaluate, procure, implement, and manage technology and customer experience solutions with a focus on realizing sustainable results for your business growth. And now, here's your host, Scott Kinka.
As IT leaders, we've historically focused on speeds and feeds as the basis of our plan, but we're moving headfirst into a future that is decidedly up the stack. It's about apps and availability with security built in. And of course, the added expectation that we're driving outcomes for the business. We're not in the back room anymore. We're in the boardroom. My guest on this episode of The Bridge is Umesh Lakshman. He's the VP of Solutions Architecture, National and Mid-Market Channels at Lumen, and he may just be one of the most interesting interviews I've ever done. This is a modern-day Renaissance man, 20-year veteran of Cisco, and is now driving a cultural reboot of sorts, his language, at Lumen, one of the world's largest network providers. This guy literally, I'm not kidding, wrote the book on MPLS. You'll have to listen in to get that part of the story. He's a world-renowned salsa dancer, a band frontman, and he's pushing hard on the way we think about the technology we buy, implement, and manage. If you are a CIO or director of IT, this is a chance to listen in on a literal Jedi in this space. We cover a lot of ground in 40 minutes, and I don't want to oversell it, but this was a lot of fun. If you feel the same way that we do about this episode, please give us a like or follow on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite platform. Let's reboot the way we think about IT. A bridge to the future, pun intended, on this episode of The Bridge. Hi, and welcome to another episode of The Bridge. We're thrilled to have you. My guest on this episode is Umesh Lakshman. He's the Vice President of Solutions Architecture for National and Mid-Markets and Channels, actually, for Lumen, which is a name I'm sure that many of our listeners know very well, but we will obviously give Umesh the opportunity to give us a little bit of that elevator pitch as we go. Let's start with welcoming. Thank you for joining us here on the show, Umesh.
And thank you for having me over, Scott. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, certainly. When we get into these episodes, we always like to start with some personality, and and I think people can figure out some of the personality from the wall behind you. We might spend a little bit of time there, but let's just start with you personally. Obviously, you're at Lumen. The career trajectory is one, but we'd love to know a little bit about you personally first.
Sure. So born and raised in India,
Okay.
and to very, very cerebral parents is maybe how I'd put it. They had 8 postgraduate degrees between the two of them. My dad was a triple PhD holder, so it was awesome just being around their awesomeness is maybe the best way to put it. Came here to do my master's back in 98. Did my master's in Wichita State, Kansas. And then as the market was booming right at the beginning of 2000, got hired into Cisco. In 2000, spent 21 years there. At that point in time, it was my longest relationship to that date. And then about 3 years ago, moved from Cisco to Lumen because I was looking for just a change. I mean, change of scenery, change of perspective, and a different way to approach the customer segments I was trying to go get more exposure with.
Got you. I want to explore that move in a moment, but you told us how you got here. Anything about you personally now you want to share?
Ooh, so getting here, I mean, I'm a self-professed storyteller and creative mind. So I have my own podcast that I'm trying to revive as a season 2 coming up. I've danced semi-professionally, salsa dancing. I've gone to the world
Wow.
championships. I've placed top 3 in the world twice. I retired back in 2018. Been a frontman for a band. I love music, which is maybe why you see 100 headsets here behind me, and there's maybe boxes and boxes of headsets
Yeah.
and earpods in my garage. Produce music. At one point, I was part of a band. We used to produce our own music. So I've written blogs. So I think creatively, I like to explore a lot.
Yeah.
And during that process, kind of found my own voice and my own identity as I explored different creative avenues. Is maybe what I'd say.
Well, you're a Renaissance man. Look at you. You got a lot going on there. Let's explore just quickly before we jump back into the work situation a little bit more about your pod. Can you tell me? It's called Breaking Boundaries.
Yeah.
I listened to a little bit of it, but I'm not going to give you what I think the commercial is. I'd love for you to give me the commercial. Tell me what your story is there.
Sure. So Breaking Boundaries was created literally in the 2 weeks between me leaving Cisco and me joining Lumen.
Mm-hmm.
Is maybe that's a 2 week hiatus that I had that I could not sit quietly. And I've always tried to find a way to give back and share stories of everyday people who do some interestingly awesome things in diversity, inclusion, equity space. And that's because I'm a leader of color in a domain that's predominantly not.
Mm-hmm.
I've had to work hard to get to where I'm at,
Sure.
and also try to be a quote unquote role model for others so that they see that representation matters. So in the DNI space in general, there's a lot of podcasts out there that are led by women, but there's very few podcasts where we're taking an allyship angle where men are talking about what should we be doing in the diversity and inclusion space. So that
Yeah.
was the lens I was looking at it. I'd been doing a lot of work at Cisco before I had moved from Cisco to Lumen in the DNI space. I was part of a employee resource group called Men for Inclusion. It's one of their core team members. So I had spoken at a few conferences
Mm-hmm.
around diversity and inclusion, belonging. So it almost became an extension for me to bring other people who I knew and give them a platform to share their story, their unique stories, and have a very different lens into what we could do as allies, as leaders, for example.
Yeah.
That was the intent of Breaking Boundaries.
I love it. And I'm not going to attempt to tell your story any more than you just told it. But what I will say is, for those of you who are watching this on YouTube, certainly while you're given the bridge with Scott Kinka a follow on Apple or Spotify today, let's make sure you also check out Breaking Boundaries. In my prep this morning, I got halfway through an episode, I wanted to at least get the tone. It's really, really well done. And congratulations on that. I'm looking forward to season 2, and you got a follow from me today. So, it'll be in my feed tomorrow. Looking
Thank you.
forward to that. So I do want to jump back then. So and it's interesting the way the personal stories and Breaking Boundaries just sort of has a place in your migrating story from Cisco to Lumen. I mean, you were at Cisco for 20 years. Sounds like you did a good job of weaving your technology story, into your personal story very well. That made it part of the job almost, right? What you were known for there. Give me a little bit of that career trajectory. Like which technologies were you in at Cisco over what periods of time? We've had many people on the pod over to talk about the various kind of monolithic groups inside of Cisco. So you normally get in one category.
Sure,
Just tell us where
sure.
you worked in Cisco kind of and over time. You don't need to give us a big depth, just trying to get a feel for your background.
So I'm almost fully sales engineering, right?
Okay.
When you talk about sales engineering, the historical sales engineering, these were the SEs who would be paired with frontline sales professionals who would call on customers. Right. That has been my trajectory through and through, in irrespective of the title and the domain of influence. That
Mm-hmm.
has been my trajectory. There's maybe some deviations to that normal, But even those deviations are more like, sales engineering support, right? So
Yeah.
you're doing proof of concepts, or big proof of concepts, or like alpha, beta, kind of like baking in with big SPs. Those were maybe the deviations to that whole trajectory. But when I started, I was what they call an associate SE, fresh off the boat, come in, and then literally just very green, came in, everything was peachy, and then the bubble burst in 2000.
Yeah.
Everybody knows what happened. And my customer base went from like 300 or something to like three in the
Wow.
SP space. And it was a very, as a newbie coming into corporate America very early in life, I was like, wow, okay, my whole life changed. I then pivoted to more of a solutions engineering support role, running proof of concepts for SPs. So I
Okay.
ran an SP field lab in Denver for about 3 years. Moved to Dallas, did that for about a year and a half as a tech lead there. Along that pathway, I was thinking of getting certs, and I got a bunch of certs, and I was like, well, I want to leave a bigger, let's say, legacy. So I wrote a book instead. So I wrote my first Cisco Press book on MPLS. In the good old days when MPLS was the coolest thing ever,
Yeah.
right back in 2005, 2006. And and
You
then
keep burying stuff that should have been in the lead, by the way. You wrote the book. You literally were working at Cisco and you wrote the book on MPLS. Let's just be honest here. What was the name of the book?
MPLS config on Cisco iOS.
All
So
right.
it's a 1,000-page,
I probably know about 40 people who read that book.
yeah.
Having worked, by the way, Gene, who worked at Verizon for a long period of time on big enterprise accounts, just raised his hand. He's like, "Yeah, I'm guilty."
Yeah.
So
It's a
we did a
1,200
lot of
page,
MPLS back in the day.
1,100 page head
Yeah,
turners, maybe what I'd say. But again, at that point in time when we were writing that book, it was the operations guide to MPLS.
sure. Of
There's
course.
a lot of books out there on MPLS on the theory, and this was a way for us to get into the nitty gritty, right? Like hands-on skills.
Real stuff. Yeah.
How would an operator really go configure all these
Mhm.
100 different features that we had out there? So we wrote that book, and I was, I think to this date, I'm the youngest Cisco Press author. I wrote that when I was 26, and then basically moved to San Jose, got married, moved to San Jose, and was one of the tech leads here in the proof of concept team here for Cisco. Got front row seats to the Fortune 500, Fortune 50 type customers, walking them through their different technology migrations and building POCs at scale for 4 to 5 years.
Yeah.
And then I said, okay, great. I've gotten a lot of hands-on skill. I know the bits and bytes of how everything works. I want to go sit in front of customers, and I want to have that interaction again. So in 2011, became an SE in the public sector space locally here, supported the university, the UC system here in the Bay Area, as well as Stanford and CNIC, which is the K through 20 backbone for the state of California. Had an amazing time working with them for 5 years, did a lot of redesigns, huge architectural changes. So I think I've put my stamp in a lot of those designs somewhere in those. And then in 2016, did a hard right pivot just before I was thinking of going down the path of, okay, I'm an SE now. And in the Cisco pathway, there's a SE, then a consulting SE, and then you can become a distinguished SE. And the distinguished are the few, they're the Avengers, right? They're like the 50 in the group of 5,000.
Yeah.
And you have a very arduous 2-year process to file your papers and then selected for it. So it's just about to go in and start the process of becoming a DSE. And I got a call saying, hey, we're looking for an SE leader to lead some of the teams in the hyperscaler space. So we're looking for this mix of very technical, but also very hardcore people leadership is required here. So I took that opportunity, did that. And for the last 5 years, I ran different teams in the hyperscaler space at Cisco. So I got front row seats to tip of the
Seeing
spear,
all
tip
of
the
it.
edge.
Yeah. So a lot of that history was probably, getting through your early stages as an SE and then, through the POC stuff and then the GovEd stuff and all that was probably, and having started in 2000, a lot of switching and routing. You know,
Oh,
like you
yeah.
said, wrote the book on MPLS, but then sort of made this conversion over to the hyperscaler. So you've seen it all on the Cisco side, it seems like. But before I jump to the move to Lumen, I have a question to ask you. Which Avenger, Umesh, would you be?
Ooh, I've always been told Iron Man.
I believe it, actually. I was just kind of thinking about that. I was waiting for the suit to start constructing itself around your head.
I wish.
Uh,
There's no nanobots in that one.
I love it. Okay, we'll get that one out of the way. Tell me about what you do at Lumen, kind of what interested you about going over there, and
Yeah.
you know, and for those who may not really know Lumen, you know, somewhere in there, give us a little bit of the elevator pitch.
Sure. And Lumen's gone through multiple iterations of identity change, I would
Mm-hmm.
say. And in the last, I would say, 12 to 18 months, with Kate Johnson coming on board as the CEO and a relatively newer
Yeah.
leadership team coming on board, that has evolved too. So our purpose has evolved to kind of unleash from furthering people through technology to really unleashing the world's digital potential. That's our purpose statement now. And our mission has been around how do we unlock business growth for our clients by connecting people, data, and apps quickly, securely, effortlessly. So those two simplistic statements is what it's led to is us trying to extract the value of what we have in terms of an asset base, right? Like we were heavy on network.
Mm-hmm.
We
Everybody
still
knows
are.
you guys for the network legacy and the
Yeah, yeah.
companies that
So
they know all the names that became part
yeah, exactly.
ultimately
So
became part of
Centurion,
Lumen.
like
Yeah.
Level 3, Embark, like
Yeah.
Savis. So there's a lot of those pieces that came in that are historical, what I would call our legacy
Mm-hmm.
and our identity, heavy, strong identity. And we're taking those, what I would call telecom focused assets, and really move into how do you get more tech adjacent. And what that means is how do you build solutions that are higher up in the stack
Mm-hmm.
and closer to the application so that we create more of a seamless one-stop shop, semi-easy button for our clients to come in and say, hey, I would like to go do this.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Here's your 4 Lego blocks that we can easily piecemeal together, from network to potentially the fabric or an edge to potentially a underlay or an overlay of security, with a look at work from anywhere kind of a view, right?
Mm-hmm.
And oh, by the way, we're trying to look at it from a digital experience as well. So maybe we can do even network as a service. So
Yeah.
we're trying to piecemeal all of those pieces together, and we're in, I would say, phase one of our own renaissance of sorts.
Yeah. So we keep coming back to this Renaissance concept. But listen, you know, we've had front row seats at Bridgepointe to
Yeah,
the Renaissance. I mean,
yeah,
I'm not one for the, you know, trying to compare rankings and all that. But let's just say, you know, we're strategic partners together, and you know, we've spent quite a bit of time and had an immense amount of success, you know, expanding the conversation
hmm
and selling those strategic services. So yeah, I mean, listen, the network is um, the least sexy part of all the things that we're talking about, but it's the enabler to make all of the other sexy parts happen, right? So
yeah,
um, you're already having the conversation. Go have the conversation about the rest. So I, you know, the in my mind, you know, my advice to CIOs or directors of IT who might be listening and have, you know, maybe any of the legacy, you know, Lumen solutions and they're, you know, on the kind of traditional telephony and connectivity side in there, there's just a lot more under the covers, right?
oh,
And
yeah.
a lot more to go get. Is that what attracted you to move to come over? By the way, we never really answered the question about why your move and you know what
Yeah,
kind
so
of
I
had you.
think for me it is you kind of really netted it out, right? Like moving away from purely just the network and the hardware
Mm-hmm.
to the service, to its consumption, to creating a higher order application centric view was
Yeah,
kind of the biggest driver from a technology standpoint. From a domain standpoint, I've always wanted to like really my next step was to run a larger domain. So the opportunity posed itself, and as I mentioned again, ding ding ding, Renaissance. At that point in time, the IC leader called me and he said, "We're looking for a cultural reboot, right? We need somebody to come in and do a cultural reboot on the way we look at technology and not sound like us."
yeah,
right? Somebody who can consume what we're
It's
doing
crazy
already,
when
but
you're
extract it.
arguably one of the biggest network providers in the world to make that
Yeah.
statement. So I don't want to skip past that. I like to make sure we say it again. Like, you were asked to come in and lead a cultural reboot in the way, frankly, that one of the biggest network providers in the world sees itself. Is that
Yes.
am I overstating that?
No, it was true because, and I'll state the domain, the lens as well, right? When I came on board, I led Enterprise West.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot run a West region similar to a Central or an East. We are just different. I'm just going to call it the way it is, right? There is geographical wonkiness. That's my technical term for it. That comes with being on the coasts
Yeah.
as compared to the center,
Yeah.
and so
And the coasts
culturally,
themselves are different also, right?
yes,
Yeah.
East and West are so different. So,
Mhm.
and for me to come in, they wanted somebody who would embody, I would say, the West Coast's way of leading
Yeah.
and show the SE community this is what culture looks like, right? This is how we get there faster, sooner, easier. And while we have challenges, we can focus on challenges as much as we want. The opportunities are 10x, right?
Yeah.
Right. So why are we not focusing on opportunities versus the challenges? And just it's a typical cultural reboot of, you know, taking your colored lenses off
Yeah.
and looking at it with clear glasses. And that's what
Totally.
needed to happen.
I say internally often, people get tired of hearing me say, stop sucking your own carbon dioxide, right? Like, take a deep breath, fresh air on this one. Like, step back,
Yeah.
we kind of keep treating ourselves the same way. You hear the same message, you believe it over time.
Yeah.
It's super interesting way of looking at it. So let's take all of that. So you lead the SC organization, you're asking it to look at the business itself and also your customers differently. But you said it earlier, it's right in your title on LinkedIn. You're a storyteller and you meet with customers every day. So let's talk a little bit about, our listeners are largely directors of IT and
Yeah.
CIOs and people like that. And, they want to know they've got peers, like that the
Yeah.
things that they're hearing that are keeping them up, or the things that are keeping their peers up at night. What are the stories that you're hearing and the stories that you're telling today? Like, what's a typical week look like in terms of the kind of problems that you're trying to solve for?
So, and I'll create some level of boundary. So I lead mid markets and channels.
Yeah.
So the size of the customers might vary, but I've led larger key customers before as well. So I'll
How do
try
you
to keep
define
it
mid
level.
market, by the way, at Lumen, just to put it in perspective?
It's basically a function of employee size in a
Yeah.
company and MRR.
Okay.
So it can be up to 5,000 employees. So like I said, the higher end of mid market could be a pretty large company.
Sure. 5,000 employees. This is a big company with big company problems. Let's be very clear,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? It
Yes.
might not be a
Indeed.
multinational corporation, but that's big company problems. That's real
Yeah.
IT.
Yeah.
Um,
Indeed.
so I get but in that space, just I wanted to make sure we clearly defined it, because people define that all kinds of different ways, right? Um, you're talking to a 5,000, a 2,500, even 1,000 employee,
Mhm.
IT lead. What's the storytelling look like?
It ties back to what I was talking about on where Lumen is headed. When you really talk about, I mean, general thematic elements that pop up when I talk to CIOs is, I'm trying to onboard new technology, but I'm trying to find an easy way to do it, minimize risk, and do it agile, faster.
Mm-hmm.
So somehow balance that. That's box one. Two, I want it to be fully integrated and weaved in with security. Security shouldn't be an afterthought. It should be always front and center. So let's not think of it as a bolt-on problem
Mm-hmm.
that we need to solve for. Um, Third, I would say consumption mechanics. How do we really take this, onboard it, consume it, operationalize it, and then use it to orchestrate and drive insights from a technology standpoint? And
Yeah.
I'm trying to stay away from jargon as much as I can, just
No, I
because,
get it. It's fine. If
right?
you need to use the
It's
jargon, use it. Just define it, right? I get you.
yeah, and last but not least is, how do I get a faster ROI? So
Yeah.
how do I do this and get a return on investment that's quick and easy and it's tangible and I can and touch and feel and I can measure it very quickly.
Yeah.
Right? It's no longer like, oh, I have a 5-year ROI term. It's like I want an ROI in 18 months or less.
Sure. There was a lot in that answer. A couple things I want to poke in on. Let's stick with the ROI one you just talked about, because you've been having SE conversations for 20 some odd years. And we have this conversation about the burden of proof for an IT leader having changed over the years, in particular since the pandemic,
Yeah.
Have we almost changed from like, get me the thing I need for as cheap as possible to get me the thing I need so that I can prove a business ROI? Have we gotten there? And do you feel like the pandemic in a lot of ways caused that change the role for the IT leader?
I mean, the pandemic, I think, changed the playbook completely for an IT leader.
Yeah.
It's a lot of reactive things that are pushed by the wayside that we'll get to it suddenly became like a P0 problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like overnight, like literally overnight, we had, I mean, even in the mid-market space, if you had 5,000 employees and if 2,500 of them were remote now, suddenly you're like, I don't have the infrastructure to balance that.
Yeah.
It became an instant change in scale and dynamics and the way technology had to be put together, almost re-architected, I would say.
Yeah.
And they had to do it quickly. So I think during the pandemic, you saw more and more managed services providers stepping in to showcase value.
Yeah.
Quickly, it was an opportunity for a lot of us to come in and showcase value and become, quote unquote, that easy button for them to come in and really consume technology at a quick and easy way without having to like usually do it in-house and having to like go through their own process.
Yeah.
Right, from a onboarding perspective. The other thing also, I feel like, to your point of proof of value, as an SE, the one thing I tell people is like, where's my demo, right? Where's my demo? Where's my POC, right? Like
Yeah.
that has become such a crucial part of, I would say, taking a opportunity from discovery to design and then potentially towards closure. Is I want to see how this is going to work, right? I want to see this. I want to look at it and I want to play with the bells and whistles with it. And so we are having to like now construct solutions that we have to go to the client base and say, here you go. This is almost like its own marketplace or its simplistic entity. You have APIs, you can play with it. Here's your sandbox. Go to town, right? For 3 months.
Yeah.
And let us know if you need something. Right?
Yeah.
So we're trying to move to those models as well in terms of proof of value.
Which I guess is, and by the way, I totally agree. I mean, the proof is always in the pudding, and demo is always the thing, right? I mean, we, as IT people, we're natively tinkerers. I think it has to be part of the DNA, right?
Yeah.
I think people think about IT often as this like very antiseptic place, and I can tell you, like the characters that we have on this show, half of them are musicians, some of them paint, most guys wrote books. Like it. I don't think people realize the direct connections there, but I'll get off my soapbox on that for a moment, right? And just come back to kind of the general. You were making a general statement a couple of minutes ago about kind of proof of value, and in the demo, I guess the question for me is this: when a lot of your services are sort of plus up on a network element, or are modifying a network element, securing a network element, changing network schema, those kinds of things, and they're not your customer already, like that makes it really hard to give them a POC, does it not? Because you sort of have that underlying, is that what you mean on this marketplace? Like expand on that a little bit for me. How do I try something with you when I'm not a customer today?
I'll maybe draw two worlds for you, right? Today's world, where Lumen is partially at, is we have a network service.
Mm-hmm.
We have a security service overlaid on top. We have potentially an edge fabric that could tie into that, right? We have managed and professional services that can put it all together.
Yeah.
You can get as complex as you want as you talk through this. Where we're headed, and step one of that is network as a service for us, is really bringing that digital front end. Like think of it in my head, I can hear Jeff Bridges' voice from Tron right now. Like the grid, the final frontier. Right. That's literally where we're trying to go, is the final frontier here, or the first frontier that we're trying to cross, is evolve the network, make it elastic, make it simple to consume, right? Instead of having it as a on-off button, give it a spigot
Yeah.
that gives them flexibility that they can increase or decrease depending on when they want to use it,
Mhm.
and really pay as you grow kind of a model, or grow as you grow kind of a model. So that's step one. So that's literally the first. Underlay itself is foundationally changing. That's where we're headed. The second thing is, instead of thinking as security as a bolt-on service,
Yeah.
everything's going to be cloud delivered. Everything's going to be delivered from our own domain. So all you got to do is go to a portal, say, "Hey, I have NAS from Lumen. I would like to add DDoS service." Click. All right.
Yeah.
And these are the flavors that are available: essentials, premium, whatever it might be. I'm going to select the right one based on what I need. Done. And it says, okay, it's going to reboot your link for a second. Done. Right. And maybe it's not even reboot, because if it's not transport dependent, it's not even needed. So it's
Sure.
just going to just service chain in the cloud.
Yeah.
3, I could now take that same service chain in the cloud model, do network. I can DDoS, which is a step one. I
Mhm.
can go from network to SASE on the back end. I can start adding SASE as a function in itself, right? Because all of those are cloud delivered pieces, right? For all effective purposes, as long as the edge can do what it needs. If I had proximity to an edge node,
Mm-hmm.
I could effectively drive that ecosystem and pull in, maybe, hey, I have 15 petabytes of storage here. Do you want storage?
Yeah.
Right? Right? Object storage here. I could maybe say, okay, click, and it creates your storage, your local network storage right away.
Yeah.
So now I'm creating with just one network link. I'm creating an ecosystem of services that sits behind it,
Mm-hmm.
and all of them are just clicks.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily, hey, I'm going to truck roll somebody. I'm going to change this box. I'm going to reconfigure this. It's going to take you 3 months to get there. I'm going to give it to you in 3 minutes or less.
Yeah. It really is remarkable how it's all coming together. I'm going to ask you one last, kind of stay with this for 1 minute, and then we'll have some fun. But we have this debate internally, like in technology, and I think it's partly born out of the idea that we've always been tinkerers at heart, and we want to buy a bunch
Yeah.
of best of breed things that put us in the integration business, not in the running our network business. You know what I mean? I got to stitch these things together. Um, but I think also partly because of the economy of rankings and analysts and all those things that we want to put people in boxes, right? But the reality of it is that the value is created and the time is given back to IT when you release solutions that are spanning multiple categories, right?
Yeah.
But it does make it hard to kind of categorize. So we have this debate about network and security all the time internally. Network or security, network and security, or is it just at this point network and security, together? How often are you having a network conversation that doesn't land in security?
You'd be amazed. Like, I would say there's still a good 40% to 50% of clients
Okay.
who have maybe a higher wall between the two boxes.
Yeah.
And even for the others, I feel like um, while the wall has reduced in height, there's still some level of, oh, that's a security team problem
Okay.
versus a network team problem. So it's an organizational mechanics
It's an
problem.
organizational problem more than it is a functional separation in a lot of
Yeah, I mean, like SASE.
Yeah.
When I'm talking SASE, it's network plus
Yeah.
security delivered as a service, end.
Yeah.
Right. So when you take that and you expect now two teams to come together to put something like that together,
It's
it's
more
just
challenging.
harder,
Yeah.
more challenging.
And look, I mean, I think it's business prudent. I mean, the whole strategy of having like the security team and having a separate C level who's managing compliance and managing security and all the things that are associated with that. Like, it makes logical sense organizationally that you can't have the fox in the hen house at all times. Like IT does the work, and we've got a security group who is both layering on security and checking and making sure that the way we're servicing the organization meets some standard. Like organizationally, that's right. Or at least organizationally that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
I think the challenge, this is a big takeaway for me, and I'm going to make a note of this because I'm going to use it in conversations. But I think organizationally, though, that does make it hard for us to, acquire, implement, and manage product that spans both network and security. And the reality of it is the network is blurred. I mean, in particular in the pandemic, when these big monolithic, MPLS networks, right? If they're out there, like, from big silvery shiny buildings aren't really as important as securing the edge and securing the people where they work and, all those things. I mean, the lines have blurred so significantly, but yet our organizations haven't morphed to simplify the operation and decision-making around it.
Exactly.
Really, this conversation, I mean, I honestly, Umesh, I could probably go with you for another hour. I'm going to have you back on. We'll do this. This has just been wildly interesting. And both have a lot of perspective in, having done kind of engineering and design work in field with clients. So getting it from your perspective, particularly after all those years with Cisco, who I've been a partner of Cisco in various businesses for many, many years and know tons of people over there. And then, currently, operate as the chief strategy officer here at Bridgepointe, where we're, incredibly closely aligned with Lumen. In fact, my next call is a QBR with our team.
And you and I are going to be on the same call.
Well, fantastic. Oh yeah. There's a jacket over here that they mailed me. I'm going to wear it in the call. So we'll be on that call in a couple of minutes. But, this has just been so fun to just kind of banter about it and not get super geeky, but really just talk about the challenges that the people that we are working with are seeing. Been really amazing. I'm going to ask you 3 fun questions to end this off, though. Are you ready?
Sure.
All right.
Sure.
The first one is I wouldn't call it fun. Aside from, The Hitchhiker's Guide to MPLS, which you wrote in 2005, are you reading right now?
I'm a big self-help leadership.
Okay.
Sometimes psychology, human psychology, all kind of stuff. So at any point in time, there's maybe 3 or 4 different things going on. I'm trying to look which ones I'm looking at.
I had to do that. Somebody asked me that question back on an episode, and I'm like,
I'm actually reading in Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl again. Right? I thought it was a good time to read. The Field Guide to Whiskey is some guy who loves my libations.
All
right. Simply Said, I know we talked about this before the podcast, but English is a kind of like a second or more like a third language, and I've invested a lot of time and energy into improving it as a skill, communication as a skill.
Yeah.
And so I read a lot about how do you simplify narratives, right? How do you make
What's that book called? Simply Said?
Simply Said.
All right. I'm going to look that one up immediately and take a look at that one. I definitely want to do that. All right. That was a good answer. Next question. This one is a little bit more dramatic.
Yeah.
Whatever the next pandemic is that happens, it's way more dramatic than this one. Maybe it's Skynet finally descending. Maybe it's Planet of the Apes. I'm not sure which one it is. Something along those lines. And one application continues to work on your mobile phone, but I'm giving you the option to choose which one. What's it going to be in that dystopian future?
Ooh, dystopian future. Spotify.
Okay. I mean, we got the musician in you already. You're like, if all this has gone to pot, nobody cares about their networks anyway. There aren't any.
Just because I feel like I'll get some level of news, I'll get some podcasts, I'll get music. It's one app that I could turn off, and I guess if it's dystopian, we'll figure out how to train pigeons to send messages at that point. iMessage doesn't matter.
Well, you just got to make sure you hit the download button before all hell breaks loose in the network.
Oh yeah,
working, right. That's
it. Only works for your liked songs list right now.
Delete everything else off your phone to make room for Spotify storage before the network goes to pot at the end of the world. All right, I get that one. That's a good one. Now this one can go any direction you want. It could be technology, business. It could be politics. It could be sports. It doesn't matter to me. Look into your crystal ball. Give me something next 12 to 18 months so we can look back the next time we talk and see if it happened.
Next 12 to 18 months. What's going to happen? Everybody's talking about it. AI is taking over. I mean, it's changed my life, honestly. In more ways than one. I use Copilot at work. I use Bing and ChatGPT all the time as my primary source of gathering data by asking questions. I'm going through a Wharton CTO program right now, and the way I study has changed because I can use something like ChatGPT to net out a whole transcript into bullets that I can consume quickly. So instead of me reading or listening to a 30-minute audio or video, I'm going and reading 3 minutes of bullets and getting 80% of it almost. Wow. So AI has changed completely the way I even approach things, and it's taken what I would call lazy me and made me lazier. But looking forward, I feel like it'll be even more interesting to see. I'm beginning to see that where with Spotify, they have this thing called DJ, right? Where you can click on DJ and it plays lists based off of your likes.
Yeah.
Right. And it feeds you more of things that you tend to listen to. And then it's just progressive learning constantly as a data point. So I feel there's things in AI that are going to evolve that will mesh themselves with the Apple Vision Pro or whatever we want to call it in the AR VR world very soon here in the next 18 months.
Okay.
Right. And
I'm really looking forward to working out of an Apple Vision at some point with all my apps up and just doing it that way. Just
Minority Report.
Instead of staring at all these monitors in front of me. That would be great.
Yeah, just Minority Report. It all that reminds me of is Minority Report of the good old days when Tom Cruise
always
is like
ends
just
in a
doing all
dystopian
this.
future, Umesh. What's going on? The ending is never good for humanity. Anyway, no, I get it. I think it's, and I get in this argument all the time. You know, people will send me when we talk about the dystopian future, you know, my dad's like, I saw a video of a robot saying, you know, that the best way to take care of the world is to kill all the humans. And I'm like, Dad, AI has to be informed. And he's like, what do you mean? I'm like, it has the same scripts for every movie you watch too. What do you think it's going to say? We never had an AI story that worked out right that ended up in a movie. I mean, come on now. He's like, oh, I didn't really think of that. I'm like, trust me, it's not arriving at that conclusion on its own right now.
I don't think the singularity will happen in 18 months, but yeah.
I do ask that question quite a bit. So that's a hot take. Well, I don't think the singularity will happen in 18 months either. I think the question is, will we know when the singularity happens, right? I mean, that's the whole, you know, kind of idea. Like, it's not going to wake up all of a sudden. If it does wake up in consciousness, do you think its first conclusion is like, I should probably tell the people who can pull the plug out of the wall that I know what I'm here. That's not the first thing it's going to come to the conclusion of. No, but I get you. Umesh, this was just a lot of fun. And I really appreciate your time. We're going to do this again soon. Thank you for joining us here on the bridge. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate the opportunity. Thank
100%.
you.
My guest has been Umesh Lakshman. He's from Lumen as the VP of Solutions Architecture there for national mid-markets and channels. Looking forward to hearing more from him. We will, in the liner notes, include a link to his podcast as well. And we're looking forward to seeing all of you soon on another episode of The Bridge. Listen, if you made it this far, there must have been some good content, or you're just a fan or a relative of mine. In either case, we appreciate you spending your most valuable asset with us, your time. We don't take that lightly. We'd also like to say one more time that we're appreciative of Bridgepointe Technologies and their belief and sponsorship of this show. We hope that if you or someone you know is thinking about your company's digital transformation, or simply the next IT project that you may not have the resources, budget, or time to get to, I'm sure that Bridgepointe, one of the country's fastest growing technology advisory and procurement firms, can help. Check out bridgepointtechnologies.com. Don't forget the E on Bridgepointe, or simply reach out to me at Skinka, SKINKA, at bpt3.net. Also take a minute, please, if you would, to give us a 5-star review on your favorite platform. It helps give us the visibility to reach other people like you. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Bridge. I'm Scott Kinka, and until next time, there's a lot of noise out there in business and in life. Do what you can to be the signal. Thanks.